Hey everyone, welcome back to Bad Bassin'. Have you ever been shopping online for a lure and you hit the drop down and 48 different colors show up? Or maybe you're out fishing and you're throwing your favorite color and their bass are just not hitting it? Well, we're going to cover the cardinal rules of color and bass fishing. And we're going to use the KISS method. Yes, that method. Stay tuned. So if you're anything like me, you've watched a lot of different YouTube videos on bass fishing and color. And there's a lot of different creators out there that have done a great job of taking the articles that have written the studies and taking a deep dive into the science behind the spectrum that bass can see and how they interpret different colors. But when you find yourself out on the lake, I always find myself trying to figure out with all that information how to interpret it and where to apply it. So we're going to keep it simple. We're going to use a method called inductive reasoning, which basically means that we're going to take a set of observations or facts as we observe them and use that to draw a generalized conclusion. Now it sounds complicated, but it's not. And with that method, we're going to develop the 4 cardinal rules of bass fishing and color. So rule number 1, match the hatch. Now I know what you're thinking. Match the hatch has been said a million times. But I want you to think outside the box and not necessarily about just color when it comes to match the hatch. I want you to think about match the hatch as more as the profile of the bait that you are trying to replicate. So you might, if you're trying to do minnows, then obviously you want to match the profile of what a minnow looks like and the presentation that a minnow gives. If you're trying to do a sunfish, you want to match the profile and the presentation of a sunfish. That all comes into play as we start to pick out what lure that we're going to use and how we're going to present it. If it applies to where match the hatch is appropriate in the situation based on the other rules, then yes, you want to present the fish as much as possible with a natural looking bait and use the colors that mimic that. So rule number 2, account for water clarity. So if you can stick your pole in the water and you can see it maybe 3-4 feet down, you have pretty average, medium range water clarity. If you stick it in the water and you can't even see it once it goes in the water, you have very poor water clarity. If you can look in the bottom and at 6 feet, 7 feet down, see the bottom, you have very good water clarity. So if you have poor water clarity, you want to use a darker color to give contrast to the water. So think like a shadow. So that's going to be your blacks, your black and blue specks, and all those darker colors that you see. As you move into the medium, you're going to start moving into more lighter colors, where your green pumpkins start to come in and all those things. Now, if you're in really good water clarity, that's when your very lighter colors and your more translucent colors, or maybe the more natural colors of some fish come into play. That also applies because they can see what is being presented better. Now, rule number 3, account for the sun and overcast. Now, the sun can affect bass in many different ways. It can affect them in the water temperature. It could drive them to the shade if it's super hot out. You might find them under docks. It just depends on a lot of different situations. But when it relates to color, typically with a bright sunny day, you're going to have much more water penetration and light penetration into that water. So you might be able, in a murky or a less visible water, get away with lightening up your bait just a little bit to get a little bit more natural. So it might take it from a very low visibility water to maybe you're able to get away with a green pumpkin or something that's a little bit more on the medium side of the spectrum. So on the flip side of that, bass tend to be a little bit more active when there's a slight overcast or a little bit of cloud in the sky. So as your overcast increases, you're obviously going to have much less light penetration into the water, and it's going to be harder for them to see your bait based on just color alone. So start thinking about, especially if you have very low visibility water, high cloud cover, that you're going to want something that even brings more attention to your bait, something that has a blade like a bladed jig or a spinner bait or a chatter bait, or something that vibrates or has some sort of sound that works, something that moves horizontal through the water would be a lot better as it brings attention to the bait itself. So rule number 4 is match the trailer and the skirt if you have one. I know it sounds silly, but you want to be as consistent as possible in the presentation of whatever lure you're fishing with. You want it to see as natural occurring as possible. If you're all dark and with darker colors, match the trailer and the skirt as darker colors. If you're going more of a medium with a green pumpkin or something like that, and you're going a little lighter, match it with a natural color or match it with your green pumpkin. What it does is just remain consistent and it makes that profile of whatever fish that you're trying to replicate or whatever bait you're trying to replicate as natural as presenting as possible. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take those 4 rules and we're going to apply them using inductive reasoning to the situations that we find ourselves on the water. With that, we're going to make a generalized conclusion of what is most likely the best color combination for you to throw. Now, I know what people are going to say is that there's times that it is going to be opposite of what you think it would be. And that's true. Because if you think about it, a generalized conclusion isn't always going to be 100% correct. But what we're trying to do is keep it as simple as possible to narrow down what is the most likely color that will be applicable and work in your situation that you find yourself. So in this example, we're going to be mimicking a blunt-nosed minnow on a sunny day with very good and clear water. So if we take rule number 1, which is match the hatch, we know that the blunt-nosed minnow is a very light colored, translucent colored minnow, and it typically has a line down the side of it like a dark line. So we're now go to rule number 2, where what is the water clarity? Since our water clarity is clear, we know that we can go on the lighter, more translucent side of the spectrum. Now we look at the overcast, and since it's sunny, we also know that we're going to have good light penetration that will be able to stay on the light side of that spectrum. So we take those things, knowing that we have a sunny day, knowing that we have clear water, and we know that we're going to match the hatch when it comes to light and profile. We can use something like this, maybe a Panorama 5.0 that is lighter, translucent, matches very well to the bait fish that we're trying to mimic, and would be rather successful for us in this situation. So in this next example, we're now going to be again mimicking a blunt-nosed minnow. But in this situation, it's going to be medium to high overcast and very low visibility water. So let's start with the water. Since it's low visibility, we're going to want to go a darker color. It's going to be more towards our blacks and our black and blues. Now, if we move to rule number 2, we're going to be overcast. So if it's going to be medium to high overcast, we're going to have very low water and light penetration into the water. So that might be a time that, because it's murky and it is high overcast, that we're going to want to use something like a bladed jig or a chatterbait, where we can use that blade to attract and use as much of that light that is in the water to attract the fish. Now, moving to rule number 1, as in match the hatch, we're obviously not going to be able to match the hatch, in my opinion, completely translucent like the blunt-nosed minnow looks in reality. So we're going to match the hatch in profile. So that means we're going to match the hatch in length and overall presentation. So we're going to act and mimic a blunt-nosed minnow as much as possible and have the same length of that minnow. That should give us the best opportunity to be successful. So in this situation, we're going to start with medium overcast and medium clarity water. So in rule number 3, and we look at sun and we look at overcast, we're looking at a pretty decent to average light penetration into the water. So it's going to be dependent on the exact situation, but we can account for, let's say, medium light penetration. So then we use that, and we know that we can go probably towards the green pumpkins, the medium range of the spectrum. We don't necessarily want to go completely light, but we don't also need to go all the way to the blacks and blues and stuff like that. So now let's move to water clarity. So with the water clarity being at medium, again, that kind of falls into the medium of the spectrum when it comes to color. Medium overcast with medium light penetration and medium water clarity, we can stay in the green pumpkin. And since that's pretty close to what the log perch is, in rule number 1, we're going to be able to match the hatch in presentation as well as match the hatch in color. So with that, I'm going to choose a chatterbait that has a green pumpkin skirt with a hog farmer that has a green pumpkin back and a lighter underbelly. This is going to be able to mimic the log perch pretty well. And this is a situation where it really comes down to matching the hatch and knowing what your bait fish is and what you're trying to replicate, because it can be done even in less than ideal conditions if you're trying to mimic the correct bait. So I hope you guys learned something. Again, with the KISS method, we're trying to keep it as simple as possible. I understand that there's always going to be exceptions to the rules, but like I mentioned before, this is a generalized conclusion that gives you the best, most likely answer. If you have anything to add, please comment. I appreciate you guys. Please like and subscribe. It helps the channel out, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good day.